Let's bring in attorney Josh Stanton. He served as counsel at Perry Law. Previously was co-director of the criminal practice clinic at Vanderbilt Law, in addition to serving as a public defender in Memphis. So, Mr. Stanton, let me ask you a little bit about your piece. In fact, I'll read from it for MSNBC.com, titled, "Jim Jordan is Abusing His Power. Fani Willis Should Call His Bluff." In it, you write this: if the Fani Willis request was the first of Jordan's misfires, he might be entitled to more benefit of the doubt. But his shenanigans here come on top of a litany of previous dubious deeds and misuse of his office over the years that call into question his fitness for the office he holds. Willis should call Jordan's bluff and remind him of those words here, and that, as the Supreme Court has put it, the national government, anxious though it may be to vindicate and protect federal rights and federal interests, always endeavors to do so in ways that will not unduly interfere with the legitimate activities of the states, end quote. If it comes to litigation, the courts will see through Jordan's efforts for the distracting and partisan political theatrics they are. The careful balance of power between the states and the federal government, although long debated ever since our nation's founding and in the decades following, is now well defined in all but the most extreme circumstances. This is not one. So, Josh, let me start by asking you whether DA Fani Willis has any obligation to respond to these requests from Jim Jordan, from the Oversight Committee. Does she have any obligation to turn over documents as she tries to do her job in Atlanta?
Well, at the moment, she's actually just received a letter from Jim Jordan. So at the moment, she hasn't received a subpoena, and she wouldn't be under any legal obligation to turn it over, even if the subpoena would be enforceable. If she ends up getting a subpoena, I think the law is clear that she wouldn't need to turn over documents even under those circumstances. I was a public defender. I'm currently a criminal defense attorney, and I can't tell you the number of times I wish I could have gone to a federal court or even to Congress and said, hey, this is unfair that my client, who's innocent, who's done nothing wrong, is being prosecuted here. And it's just the case that in a state court, the federal government, either federal courts, Congress, they just don't have a place to be able to come in and step in and request documents and try to figure out what's going on in the head of the local prosecutor, whether it's fair or not.
And Rev, as Josh writes, this is a tactic that Jim Jordan, the Oversight Committee, used previously with Alvin Bragg in the Manhattan DA's office in the Stormy Daniels case. This is an intervention on behalf of Donald Trump. And
I think that it is clear, and I would like Josh to address it, that we're really seeing, as they talk about the weaponizing of the Justice Department with no evidence, they're weaponizing Congress in areas that they really have no business even being in. And if you allow that to continue, you would have Congress people decide to do their politics by committee summons or subpoenas or by committee inquiries, which really undermines the whole process of law at a state level or even a federal level, Josh.
Right, exactly. Basically what this is, it's taking what is really a routine state prosecution, and that we can view, again, whether that's fair or not, in so many state prosecutions against individual defendants we may have differing views about, but really Congress just has no place to question the individual judgment of an individual prosecutor in an individual case. There might be circumstances where Congress could look at how are federal dollars being spent at this district attorney's office throughout a year, over many, many cases. There might be circumstances where Congress has a place to ask, where are civil rights being violated systematically? But it's really inappropriate for a sitting congressperson to send a letter, and we expect a follow-up subpoena to try to interfere with an individual prosecution.
Josh, can I broaden this out just a little bit and ask about some of the timing issues? Look, nobody seems to think that Fani Willis is going to get her desire to have all of this the trial of all 19 defendants start next spring, but we've seen a couple of them say that they wanted speedier trials. What would be the implication for Donald Trump's trial, for example, even if it was pushed back later, if there were speedier trials? Would this be the risk of the prosecution revealing its hand, bearing in mind that there's an election coming up? Would we then start to see some of the same kind of evidence that the prosecution was going to use? Could that potentially have an impact on voters as they go into the polls. How do you see that playing out if a couple of these defendants did manage to get a much speedier start to their own trials?
Well, as a criminal defense attorney, I can tell you that nothing is more helpful than finding out what is the information that's going to be testified to at trial ahead of time. So if these other co-defendants actually manage to have their trials in advance, that gives Trump a really big advantage by the time it's time for his trial, because he knows what those witnesses are going to say. His lawyers can prepare questions with that information in advance, and that puts him in a better spot. Now, the evidence is pretty overwhelming against him, so I'm not sure how helpful that will end up being, but it certainly gives him a slightly better shot than if he didn't have that information in advance.
Josh's piece is up right now at MSNBC.com. Attorney Josh Stanton, thanks so much for bringing it to us. We appreciate it.